Welcome back to How China Works. I'm Brendan Davis. My co-host Ying Li will be with us in just a few minutes. Our guest this week is Mark Levine. Mark was introduced to me originally by our friend Kevin Geiger, who you've heard on this show. He's actually this week's guest on my other podcast, If I Knew You Better, a great friend of us as well as of the shows. He met Mark at an event and he heard him singing and playing his original folk songs that are often in English, but that tell these classical stories about China, about the history and culture of all these different regions and peoples and different events that are important to Chinese people. And Kevin was so impressed with Mark that he said, you guys have to interview him, and he connected us, and here we are. Mark is a pretty incredible guy. He is a permanent resident of China, which means he is a green card holder, very rare. He is also the recipient of the Friendship Award. Now, what that is China's highest honor that they give to a foreign citizen who is a civilian, and that's really, really, really rare. Mark has a master's and PhD in social work. He is from Los Angeles. He was a professor in the U.S. for about 20 years between San Francisco and New York, and then he was a volunteer organizer, a community organizer for 30 years before moving to China. He spent his 60th birthday in China. He's been a hobbyist musician his whole life, but he never pursued it professionally. He moved to China for education and some life change opportunities ahead of the Beijing Olympics, and he fell in love with the people and the culture here. On this interview, he tells his story about how he became this widely regarded folk artist here, in large part thanks to his friend Fuhan, who he credits extensively and who we're going to get to very soon. In this interview, I introduced Ying Li to the story of Isabel Crook, who Fuhan made a documentary film about. Mark had sent me this link, and it's pretty cool for me, listening back to this as I edited, and I hope this is fun for you too, to hear us deciding in real time that we must have Fuhan on our show. That is now happening. We have our very first How China Works live event coming up as a result. We are going to screen Fuhan's documentary about a lady named Isabel Crook. I'll tell you about her in a moment. Ying and I will then interview Fuhan, and Mark will join us finally at the end to also discuss their particular musical collaboration. All of this is going to be recorded and released as a special podcast episode. Some video will be taken. 2 details about how this will be released will be determined. I'll tell you more about that as it rolls. Isabel Crook and some of her friends and family are rumored to be joining us that night in the audience also, so it should be really, really incredible. Isabel is, among other things, the oldest foreign resident of China. She is ethnically Canadian. Her parents are from Canada, but they came here right towards the end of World War I. Isabel is 104 years old. She was born in Chengdu. She lived back in Canada for a few years of her life in her later life, but she is 101 years, I think, of living in China total. And Fuhan, who Mark is going to tell you a lot about in this episode, as well as who you will get to hear from herself in a couple of weeks, made her very first documentary film as a filmmaker on Isabel Crook, who she has known for years. It is such a cool film. After we have done our live event, I will also include the link. That film is available online right now, and I will include that link along with that special episode so you can listen to the episode, but you can watch the film ahead of time and really appreciate it. Details and ticket information are linked in the show notes for this episode, and you can always go to howchinaworkspodcast.com to find out more about the show in general, and specifically, there is a page for How China Works Live. Lastly, for now, as we were preparing this, Mark sent me about 138 links to performances and articles to possibly include in the show notes. I exaggerate, but it's close to that. And I need time to sort through everything to decide what are the very best ones to include. I'm also going to circle back with Mark. So please bookmark the show notes page on our website. Check back soon for more information as we expand the posts there. But for now, please enjoy our conversation with the very cool Mark Levine. Well, we're glad to have Mark Levine with us here on the show. Mark, thanks for coming.
I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy that you got my family name right, Levine. A lot of times people ask, what is it? Levine, Levine?
Well, I'm a fellow Wigwal-Ren, and I've had many friends who have your family name, okay. but it is harder when you don't encounter it that much in China.
I've actually met 2 others here.
Okay.
Both Americans. And one of them lived here for a long time, and I met him shortly before he moved back to the U.S. But then another one, I was on my campus, and I'm walking along, and there's this guy, looks lost. He's trying to figure out where to go. So I try to be helpful if I see somebody, and I went up to him, and I showed him, I led him where he was going, and then I said, my name is Mark. What's yours? He says, Mark. And then I said, what's your family name? He says, Levine. I said, Levine. I said, another one. So anyway, 2 more. Nice in China.
Thanks for being on How China Works.
Thrilled.
I like your name, 马克力文 in Chinese too, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so what does that mean in Chinese? What is your
It's
name?
the same.
Sort of-
It's just a transliteration of my name. It's a
transliteration?
phonetic transliteration.
Do most
of my
Chinese
name.
people call you 马克力文?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And I have, I'm not wearing it at the moment, but nobody can see that, but I have many, many hats. Baseball caps, winter knitted caps, and they have my name in Chinese. So I'm walking down the street, and all of a sudden somebody yells out, Mark Li Wen. And at first my reaction is, they know me. And then I suddenly remember, oh, it's my hat. My name is on my hat. They don't really know me. I'm not as famous as I thought I might be.
Well, there's always hope. There's always time for that. Well, speaking of famous, you're actually pretty well known in China, but we are going to get to that in due time. First, we want to start. I want to ask you to tell us the short version of who you are and who you were prior to coming to China, because you had a whole life before ever joining us here.
Yeah, I was kind of old when I came. I come from L.A., Los Angeles, and I grew up at a time when many people would come. When I was a teenager in the early 60s, and I was born in 48, and people would come up and ask, where are you from? Okay. And I'd say, right here, L.A. And they say, really? I never met anybody born in Los Angeles before. So that's how long
it's still
ago
not that
it was.
common, being a transplant.
But
it's
you know what?
common.
Let me jump a little bit ahead. This is one of the reasons that I like Beijing. It reminds me of L.A. in the 50s and 60s. We had smog. We had the traffic jams. We had lots of people who weren't from there, both from all around the world as well as from elsewhere in the country. And it was a place that many people came to try to fulfill a dream. I wrote a song about this called Bei Piao, back to there. So back to the prior life. I went to college in Los Angeles. I went to graduate school in Ohio. I got a master's and a PhD in sociology.
Okay.
So technically I'm a sociologist. I taught for a couple of years both in graduate school and afterwards. I taught in upstate New York, where people aren't familiar with outside of New York City, but this is the area where people have license plate frames that say, I'm from the other New York.
Right.
They don't want to be identified.
Like Schenectady or...
Yeah, well, that's Albany, Schenectady, Troy, anywhere outside of New York City.
Right.
And I taught there, and then I moved back to California, and this time the Bay Area. So I spent lots of time in LA, lots of time in San Francisco. I am one of the very few people who liked both places. Most Angelinos do not like San Francisco, and most San Franciscans cannot stand Los Angeles.
And this is her U.S. Home is San Francisco.
I left my heart in San Francisco. Anyway,
where were you in San Francisco?
Just downtown San Francisco.
Where?
Close to the Union Square.
Where? Oh, what's the Union Square?
Really
I was on Hayes Street Hill. I was about 5 houses. I was between Webster and Fillmore on Hayes. Wow. I was, if I walked for about 5 minutes north up the hill and I turned around, I could see the painted ladies. These are these old Victorians, and in the background is the modern skyline of San Francisco.
That's an amazing
So that's
view.
where I was. And I moved there when, frankly, it was a more interesting place than it is today. Because now you got to have a lot of money, and it's rich people. And what happened when I moved there in 76, there were wealthy people there.
Yeah.
But there were working people, there was counterculture, there was ethnic culture, there was high culture. It was a much more diverse place, and much more interesting.
San Francisco
it was really
has
fascinating.
Changed a lot, right?
Changed dramatically. And now it's a beautiful city, but it's much more difficult for many people who don't have a lot of money to live there.
I mean, were you in San Francisco and we're going to get to all the China stuff in a moment, but I have to ask, and so I got this opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah.
I mean, were you in San Francisco and in around the Haight and all this during the time of like the music scene exploding?
I moved there in
and everything?
'76.
Okay, so you missed that
so
by
I came
about
afterwards.
8 years,
yeah,
7, 8
I came
years,
afterwards. But I used to drive by, and people would point out, that's the place that the Grateful Dead
that
lived.
used to play,
where they used to live, right?
Berkeley.
And so I'm familiar with that area. But I was there for 24 years.
Wow.
So a long time. I moved out in 2000. I moved back to Southern California. And then what happened was after teaching, I left the university and I became what some people refer to as a public sociologist. In other words, I worked as a full-time volunteer organizer with an organization of low-income workers. And I did that for 30 years.
Wow.
Before I came to China.
Wow. What do you enjoy the most for doing this? When you were here?
I woke up every morning and I realized there's something I know what to do and I know why to do it. That there are people who need my help and I can help them. And that was the most important thing. And my life is significantly different now, and I enjoy my life very much. But all told, I'm very happy with the totality of things that I've done with my life, and it gives me a perspective through that that perhaps is different than many people.
Wow, interesting. You came to China in 2005, right?
5, yeah.
What was the reason? The first reason?
I had some friends, people that I had worked with actually, who had come to China for a year or a semester to teach. This was 2005. These were the days prior to the Beijing Olympics, and there was a massive campaign, for people to learn Chinese. And learn English. They already knew Chinese.
Right.
All right.
The motivation is very strong for the Olympics, right?
Yes, tremendous. And there was lots of government encouragement and support, and not only in schools, but in separate training centers and so on. Police were learning English. Not exactly when I came, because I didn't come originally to Beijing, but when I came to Beijing 2 years later, what happened was I was doing some extra teaching, and I taught people who worked at Jishuatan Hospital, nurses. I taught people at China Post. I taught people from the Bank of China, all right, because everybody was anticipating this large influx of foreigners, and they're going to need to go to the bank, and they're going to want to mail letters, and they're going to need to go to the hospital, some of them, so that everybody's going to need to have some ability to have some communication. But my original destination was in Jiangsu province, a city called Huai'an, which is about 2 hours north of Nanjing.
Why there?
It was the home of the first prime minister of the People's Republic of China, Zhou Enlai. And I thought, well, that's an interesting place. I knew some about 20th century history of China, but I didn't really know about places. So I was offered a number of jobs. I had decided, all of my friends had gone. Some had worked at summer camps. Some had worked in middle schools, high schools. And I decided they had wonderful experiences. And I figured, well, let me come for a year. And I decided, since I had a PhD, let me try to go to a university.
Sure.
So, and I had a number of job offers, and the thing that struck me was that the Teachers College in the city of Huai'an, the letter inviting me to come said, Huai'an Teachers College is proud to be located in the city of Huai'an, which is the hometown of the first premier of the People's Republic of China, Zhou Enlai. And I said, guess that's where I'll go. They differentiated themselves from every place else immediately. Yeah. And I went, and it was a very, very interesting place. It was very good. This is northern Jiangsu province, which it's about 2 hours north of Nanjing. And generally, it's much less developed portion. It still is, but there's been a massive amount of development since the time that I moved there. And some people would refer to Huai'an as a small, poor city. But one day I mentioned this to one of my colleagues, and he said, no, not exactly. He says, It's a small, poor city in Jiangsu province, but Jiangsu province is one of the more developed provinces. So you have to clarify, because there are a lot of places that are smaller and a lot of places are poorer.
Sure.
And I was there. This is a completely new experience to me. I had one fear about coming to China, and that has to do with the fact that I've always, a very significant part of my life was always humor. When I was a kid, my mother's dream, unlike most Jewish mothers' dreams, was not for me to become a doctor or a lawyer. It was to be a stand-up comedian.
Normally the comedians become that because they rebelled against.
No. This is my mother's dream.
Were you rebellious?
Wow.
No, I wasn't. This was my dream. Well, I didn't become a stand-up comedian, but I always incorporated humor.
Did she want you to have a show at the Catskills or something like that?
To start with, but that's not the end place.
Be Danny Thomas.
No, that's not the end place. You got to be in Vegas. You got to have a TV show, variety show, but that was it. So this was made for a very interesting childhood.
That's hilarious.
Because my mother, there's a very fine line between humor and being insulting or offensive.
I've been told this.
Yes.
So
my mother allowed me to say anything that I wanted, as long as she was still laughing.
Oh, nice.
And if she wasn't laughing, then I had to run. But I knew I crossed the line there. But the interesting thing is, years later, when my son went to, I was living in the Bay Area, and that's where he was raised, and he went to college at UCLA. And for a couple of years when he was in school, he lived with my parents in Studio City.
All right.
And right at the, just on the valley side.
Yeah.
Right near Mulholland Drive and Laurel Canyon.
Yeah, the valley side of the hills.
Yeah.
The other side, I lived on the Hollywood side of the hills. Yeah.
Barely on the valley side. Almost at the top.
Yeah.
And he also lived with my parents a few years after he graduated college. And I was somewhere and someone was asking him about what was it like living with my mother. And all of a sudden he tells it, he and I had never discussed this before. And he tells exactly the same story.
Yeah.
That anything as long as she was laughing.
Awesome.
And so because of that, although I never became a stand-up comedian, humor was always a big part of how I interacted with people and communicated. So I was kind of fearful. I'm going to come to China, and I'm going to be talking to these Chinese students, and it's only in English, and they're not going to laugh. And what am I going to do if they don't laugh? All right. And I found that this fear was unwarranted.
Okay.
The fear was absolutely unwarranted because I have easily found ways to get my students to appreciate my humor. So that made life infinitely easier and more exciting.
Yeah. Besides being a professor or teacher here in China for many years, right? And you're also a musician, professional musician. You play guitar, you sing songs, and you don't speak Chinese. But you sing Chinese songs. You produce Chinese songs.
Can I back up?
Yeah.
Can I tell you about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just
so
curious,
my
right?
mother, one of the other things my parents were very interested in, my mother in particular. My father was a really easygoing guy, whatever. Everything's okay. But my mother was particularly interested in my learning to play some kind of musical instrument. But unlike many parents, particularly Chinese parents, my mother's attitude was, I had a guitar teacher. Actually, first my mother's approach was, the way I'm going to encourage you to learn this instrument, any instrument, I'm going to learn it at the same time. So, first instrument was accordion, and it was too big for me.
Yeah, okay.
Second, I probably would have been about 7, maybe 8. Second instrument was piano, and the teacher was too drunk. He'd come, we had a piano in our house, he'd come, he was just falling over, reeking of alcohol. So that was the end of that. So then we moved on to guitar, and my first guitar teacher was one of my parents' friends who was a graduate student in psychology, a PhD student at the university, and she taught me for a year folk music. And then at the end of that year, she says, I'm done. I don't know anything that you don't know. Nothing more I can teach you. So then we went on to my parents' second friend, who was an electrician. but he played more.
Yeah.
And that was 4 years. So, and at the end of 4 years, one day, after that one lesson, he announces, "I've taught you everything I can teach you." And so at the age of 15, I became a guitar teacher, and I taught little kids, 9, 10-year-old kids. And then got a car at 16, and I could drive out to Whittier, and one kid, 9-year-old kid, his neighbor wanted to learn to play, and then the next neighbor, and then next. So I'd spend 3 hours going from house to house.
Nice.
It was very convenient.
Make that drive worth it.
Made it very good. And then had a whole series of bands, a jug band, country folk band, rock band. And by the time I was 18, I decided this isn't going to make it. Not gonna, it was the typical garage band. And it literally was a garage band. We would play in our garage, practice, and we had a number of shows and so on. But at that point, I decided, forget it. Music is always going to be part of my life, but it's not going to be my life. So, but I had played enough guitar. I often meet students today or other people. I say, "You play an instrument?" And they say, "I used to play."
Right.
All right. I never said I used to play. Sometimes I was too busy and I didn't play for a year or 2 years, but I never thought I used to play. I play guitar. I'm just too busy now. So it was always part of my life. And then what happened was I came to China, and I always played covers. I always played other people's music, all different kinds of music, but always something that someone else wrote. So I'm in Jiangsu province teaching the teachers college. And what happened was I taught for 1 year, and then I decided, okay, I'm just going to stay. And I stayed, and I taught for a second year, and then I went and talked to the school and said, okay, my contract's going to end soon, and I'd like to get another contract. In fact, I'd like to stay a while. And the response was, "We're very sorry, Mark. We have a rule here at our school that says foreign teachers can only stay for a maximum of 2 years." So
at that time, right?
At that time, and maybe still today.
Did they want to keep it fresh, or was there?
They want to keep it fresh. There was no problem. And I spent 24 hours with a wide range of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion, disappointment. And suddenly I caught myself and I said, it's their school.
Yeah.
They can decide who they want to teach. And I sat down in my apartment, picked up my guitar, and 3 hours later, I had written a song called Huaiyan, Promise of the Future. Because part of what happened was, as I'm in this, the city is changing dramatically. The whole time I'm there, buildings are appearing out of nowhere in record speed. And things were changing so fast. So this song basically goes through, the city has these 4 counties, and one place is mostly farmland, and another has forest land, and then another has a big lake, Hongzhou Lake, which is the 4th largest freshwater lake in China. And so the song goes through that and goes through all of the beautiful scenery and the hardworking people, but it ends with, but it's the promise of the future that's coming into view. Okay, and then I connect this was the hometown of Zhou Enlai, and this was what he was trying to build. So as soon as I finished it, I ran down to the Foreign Affairs office for the city of Huaiyan. I had gotten to meet some of them because originally they had, the first year, they had a couple events where they invited all of the foreign teachers and other foreigners who were working in the city, and we had a dinner and stuff. And I got to know a few of them because I also did some additional editing work for them. And I went down to their office and I said, get everybody together. I have a gift for you. And I played this song, and they asked me to play it again. All the people I was playing for spoke English. And then the deputy director immediately assigned one of his staff members, says, translate this, get this translated. And she not only got it translated, she then got a friend of hers who was a poet to turn it into...
To like melodically make it work in Chinese.
Yes. Yeah. And which... I have never sung it in Chinese, but it was very nice. And then this became the start.
Nice.
And then what happened, I came to Beijing. How did I get to Beijing? So not going to be in Huai'an anymore. Frankly, I have to admit it. I didn't want to go to Shanghai.
Okay.
And I didn't want to come to Beijing.
Beijingers. Oh, okay.
No,
I was about to say Beijingers will give you
why
applause.
why did I not want to go to Shanghai?
Talk about rivalry,
Beijing,
Shanghai.
Yeah, I understand that. No, but I grew up in L.A. I lived
Yeah.
24 years in San Francisco.
Exactly.
I never really lived in New York, but if you put together 3 months here, a month there, 6 months there, I spent three years in New York City.
Right.
What do I need Shanghai for? It's not a
Exactly.
big international city, and I had been to Shanghai a few times. So I said, okay, it's fine, but why do I need that? And I had this experience in a smaller city. And I had assumed that Beijing was like Shanghai.
Oh,
But I had never been here, and I was offered 2 jobs. One at Tsinghua University, and I was actually offered 18 jobs, but 2 of them in Beijing. And I figured, well, instead of just turning them down and going somewhere else, I should probably pay a visit. And
Right.
I'll go have some interviews, and I'll see the city a little bit. And then the other one was where I decided to teach, a university called Minzu University of China. Minzu are nationalities, and it's the only school in the country that has students and faculty from all 56 Chinese ethnic groups, and 70% of our students are Chinese minority students. So I had interviews at both of those. And then at the end of that time, I realized I'm coming to Beijing. And then I had a mental tennis match. And I'm thinking, Tsinghua, Minda, Tsinghua, Minda.
Because Tsinghua is like
Yes,
Harvard
it's-
of China, basically.
yes.
So
And then finally I sat down, another 24-hour period of resolving contradictions. And I sat down and I wrote a letter to Tsinghua saying, thank you very much. I'm very honored to be offered a position at your school, but I'm not coming. And I decided to go to Minzu University of China. And I explain, when I'm explaining this to my students, I teach them a word, second guessing, right? You know what that is? Second guessing. Sometimes you make a decision, and then after you make that decision, you think, is that the right decision? What if I had decided the other thing? All right? Not 1 second of second guessing since I made that decision.
So for me, from my understanding, it's your second time to take out your independent thinking and to make a choice like this. This is quite precious. I have some relevant experience like this because I had to choose to go to the United States or go to Brazil for when I was doing my master and offered an opportunity to teach overseas. And I choose Brazil. Because Brazil was mysterious to me. And Brazil has this uniqueness and I can learn Portuguese.
Yeah, actually it's my third time. So the first time was when I left the academic world and became a full-time volunteer for 30 years.
Wow.
Second time was when I decided to come to China and then stay in China. And the third time is when I decided to come to Minzu Dashui.
So you were not even having 1 second of struggling
No.
and making this kind of choices.
No.
There's always 2 best offers.
The struggle was resolved in 24 hours.
wow. Did you get a song out of that one as well?
I have a song about teaching. So after I came to Beijing, I just started writing more songs. I have a song about Minzu University of
a
China.
career of songs.
It's called I Teach English in China. And the first line is, I teach English in China at Zhongyang Minzu Dashui. Oh, what a sight, so colorful and so bright with the Minzu on display. All right. And, but so I came here in July I moved to Beijing on July 6th. Came on an overnight train, July 6th of 2007. And I turned 60 on February 19th, 2008.
Oh, okay, wow.
All right, so I'm 71 now. So I turned 60, and by that time, I had 11 songs. And all of the songs relate to China.
Right.
All of them. And they're all some variation of country folk music.
Sure.
All right? And a couple of things that are very important here. One, the first dozen, it's now closer to 75 songs.
Right.
But the first dozen or so, people would say, oh, you're a songwriter. And I'd say, no, I'm not, because I'm not a religious or a spiritual person, but these songs just kind of came to me. I'd be walking down the street and all of a sudden the lyrics would start pouring through my mind. It wasn't my intent to write a song. Even the first song about Huayan, I wasn't sitting there, I was just going to play. And then all of a sudden these words start coming to me. I'd have to write them down really quickly. And I'd be walking down the street and then words, I got to get a pen, I got to write it down, I got to get to a guitar, fill out a melody. And sometimes the melody would come with it. And sometimes I had spent most of the time in first year in China, I spent just not really doing vocals, just doing a lot of instrumentals and just playing and playing. And so I had these melodies. Some of them were sitting there. So that'll go with these. And I'd figure out stuff and try several different melodies. So it was only later that I could make. Now, right, I was just in Yantai. I came back and I have a chorus and at least 2 verses of a song that I wrote the next day because I made a decision. I'm going to write a song about Yantai. I mentioned the song Bei Piao. Somebody asked me to write a song about Bei Piao.
Do you want to share with our audience what Bei Piao is?
Bei Piao, yes. And at first I wasn't sure exactly what it means, but I include it in the song. All right, Bei stands for Beijing and Piao are like the lotus leaves that float on the water, unrooted, have no roots. All right, and that this is what many foreigners are like. Not just foreigners, but Chinese people who come to Beijing, and they don't really have their roots here, but this is the excitement. And the opportunities are here, and people say, that's where I'm going to go, and that's what I'm going to do. And this is part of what I was saying. This was similar to LA when I was there in the 50s and 60s when I was growing up.
It's a city of transplants.
Yes, and it was a city of people coming, here's where I'm going to make my dream come true. Now, there's one other key thing that I have to talk about, because all of the things that happened after that are not my doing alone. The very first day that I arrived in Beijing, the first place I went to was Minzu University. And I was supposed to have the interview there and then go to Tsinghua. And what happened was I arrived on campus very early. I took an overnight train. No, I didn't take an overnight train. This trip was a train. Another trip was an overnight sleeper bus, which is awful.
Yeah, I don't think I want to do that.
But no, you don't want to do that. But I took an overnight train and I got to the campus, and I don't speak Chinese, and I'm looking for a particular building. I'm actually looking for the Office of International Relations. And I asked the guard, and the guard doesn't speak English, and I ask 1 or 2 other people, and either they don't speak English or they're not confident enough in their English, so they don't want to tell me. And suddenly this young woman is walking across campus, and I say, excuse me, do you speak English? And she says, a little. So I explain the situation. So she walks me over. She says, I think I know. So she walks me over to this building, and it doesn't say Office of International Education. It says the Office of International Affairs. It says the College of International Education, which means it's for foreign students. The Office of International Relations deals with anything foreign teachers, anything involving foreign government. So it was the wrong place. So I said, okay, let me check it out. So I go in the building. And to this day, I'm not quite clear. I remember taking an elevator to the 6th floor, and I don't quite understand how I got into the building. Because I get to the 6th floor, I get out of the elevator, I look down the hallway, and there's women's clothing hanging outside of the doors. You're probably familiar with this. And 2 women, young women, come walking out, and they say, can we help you? I said, yeah, I'm looking for this, and I'm supposed to be on the 6th floor. And then I said, I think I'm supposed to stay here tonight. And they say, you're not staying here. This is a graduate student's women's dormitory. So I got in the elevator, I scrambled down. I managed to find somebody else, and I eventually found the building. So what then happened was later that evening, this person, her name is Fu Han. And we had exchanged phone numbers.
The woman who helped you earlier.
Yeah. And so she sent me a message. How did it go? So I told her about the interviews, and I told her what she did, right? That she had led me to this dormitory. And she just happened to be on campus because here is the campus, and I entered this gate, and so did she. But she lived outside the campus on the other side, and she had nothing to do with the university. She was just walking through.
She was taking a shortcut.
Through the university.
Not even a student.
No, didn't go to school there, nothing. All right, so then she apologized for that. I said, it's okay. So the next morning, I wake up. I don't have to take a train till 9 o'clock. So I sent her a message about 7 saying, I just realized I have a whole day in Beijing, and I don't know anybody here. So do you have any time to show me around? So she says, okay. So she said, we arranged to meet. She was a piano teacher at the time, teaching kids piano. She had developed this method to teach 5- and 6-year-old kids piano and English at the same time.
Wow, okay.
So she said, I have a lesson, but we can go somewhere. And she took me to Tiananmen Square and went to the Forbidden City. And then we stayed in touch. And got to know each other better. And by the time I moved to Beijing, I now had a friend.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm 60. She asks me, what do you want to do for your birthday? And I say, I'd like to go to a recording studio and record my 11 or 12 songs. So she makes arrangements for that, but we had to change it because I was teaching, doing some special tutoring for the husband of one of my colleagues who was an economist, and he had just moved from Inner Mongolia, and he moved to Beijing, and he was working with the government trying to recruit foreign investment, and his English wasn't good enough. So I was tutoring him, and he discovered it was going to be my 60th birthday, and 60 is an important number in China, and he said, I have to have a dinner for you. I said, no, you don't. He says, yes. He says, invite anybody you want. Pick out any restaurant you want. As many people as you want. We'll go there. So I had to move the recording up a day. And then I decided, why don't I give everybody who comes to dinner a copy of, let's make a CD. So Fu Han recruited, she was a student studying at the time design, not art design, but like program design, campaign design at Renmin University in a master class. And she recruited one of her classmates, and they sat and they made CD covers and they copied. This was this is my 60th birthday, so 2008.
Yeah.
2008, and so they made all these, and we made 22 CDs, and we gave everybody one. And then when we were all done, I said to her, I'd really like to share my music. Would you help me? And her answer was, no, I don't want to do that. So then what happened was, this was right before the Olympics, and they start carrying the Olympic torch. And I don't know if you remember, but people in various countries were interfering with the torch. They were telling China shouldn't have the Olympics. Yeah. All right, China's a bad country. They shouldn't have the Olympics. So they're trying to take it away. So Fu Han said, this made her angry. She said, we have problems, but there are good things here too. And it seems like a lot of the media in the West doesn't pay attention to that. And then she said, but Mark's songs are different. So I should help him. So she went and she got a license to be an artist agent. She went, got a training program, got a license. She took my CD, she sent it off to various recording companies, culture companies in Beijing, and she followed up and called them up, and they said, we're not interested. We're not interested. 1, he's old. 2, he doesn't have a lot of money. If you want to pay money, of course we'll do this. And 3rd, he doesn't speak Chinese. 4, there were 4 reasons. And 4th, he's not famous. So she said, what can I do? They said, go get famous. Get him famous. So she worked like crazy. I worked hard, but she worked like crazy. And she would find things. One of the first big performance shows was in Hunan province, in the city of Zhangjiajie, which is this beautiful place. You know the movie Avatar?
Sure.
The mountain, the
it's modeled
formations
on
is
that.
modeled
Yeah.
after Zhangjiajie. Okay, and they had this event. They held it for 3 years. It was called the Zhangjiajie International Country Music Week. And she found out about this. It was 2009, 11, and 13. And it was in this beautiful scenic area. It was lasting for a week. And it was outside shows in the mountains, by a lake, all different kinds. There's a beautiful old cave that is all lit up and very nice to go through. And she called him up and said, "You got to have Mark Levine." And they said, "No, our program's already filled." And then she called him the next day and said, "You got to have Mark Levine. He lives in China. There's other people don't live in China, and he writes songs about China." And then they said, "Sorry, too late. Everything's full. We got our program." They had, that year there were 500 foreign musicians, dancers. Country music they defined based on whatever was characteristic of that country.
Right.
So in the U.S., it's what country music. Canada and Australia were the same, but Argentina was tango.
Okay.
All right.
So it's a lot more like what you associate as like a national music of a
Yes,
place.
national music, right? And there were a lot of Chinese performers and so on. And there was like people from 22 countries, African dancers and drummers and so on, all different kinds of stuff. And after a week of her calling every day, they said, "Okay, he can be on the show." And then they said, "Could you come here and help us for the next 2 weeks while we prepare?" All right. So she had demonstrated this persistence, and this stick-to-itiveness.
They might be able to use a girl like
yeah,
her.
so she actually became, there were two things. One, she took the lead in getting them some corporate sponsors, which was very critical. But then the other thing that subsequently moved her in a variety of different directions was she became, she was kind of the liaison. She'd learned more English in the meantime, and she kind of became the person anytime they had trouble with a foreigner needed something from wherever.
Right.
She was the person that they called on.
Yeah.
Because part of what had happened was, one, through me, but also through various colleagues that I have and others, she began to meet people from a number of different countries. And many Chinese people, even if they speak English, they're not necessarily familiar with the appropriate ways of what is going to be considered nice or not nice, and so on. And she had learned to deal with people from a lot of different countries.
No, I could see.
So therefore, she became the person. So and so has this problem.
She is a very culturally intelligent entrepreneur. For me, I having this big entrepreneurship in my head while listening to this story, and I need to meet her.
Yeah, you do, and she has some amazing things that are things that on her own that are just fascinating.
We might have to have her on another show, actually. Have me the companion piece.
She is an extraordinary person. In the book that I subsequently wrote, I have a whole section on her, and I'm in the process of writing another one. And I just got the copyright for the original book was just returned to me after 5 years.
Wow.
So the new book, basically, the new book will have some new stuff. But I realize the new stuff doesn't make any sense without the old stuff. So I'll probably weave it in, and I have a big update on her. All right, because just an extraordinary person. But I owe her absolutely so much. I have to admit, I've worked very hard at what I've done. And part of it is, so this is the other question that you asked about learning Chinese, learning to sing Chinese.
Yeah, how do you make it?
Yeah, because you have this strong academic background, and you've been a teacher and educator for years. And I mean, the assumption would be that you know how to teach, therefore you know how to learn.
Yeah, well, I do.
But Chinese is a tricky thing.
No, it's not the problem. I know how to learn, but I'm in order to learn a language. Yeah. Well, let me back up. Sometimes I'm asked to give a lecture about something I'm not familiar with. I've lectured at 60 universities around China, some of them many, many times, all over China, on a variety of different subjects. And every once in a while, I'm asked to give a lecture on something that I don't know about. And after first being hesitant, I came to the conclusion, well, look, I got a PhD. What did I learn through getting a PhD? I learned how to learn.
Right.
All right, that was the most important thing. So unless we're talking about math or physics, which I have no foundation in, or some language, anything in social sciences, humanities, I know how to read, I know how to study, I know how to find material. So of course I can do that. Now, the problem with language, and I've always had this problem with language, is that I am the kind of person who requires a teacher. I cannot just be in an area and be surrounded by people. You can't pick it up by osmosis. I cannot pick it up that way. I've had friends who can do that in China. I had friends who did that, learned Spanish that way in the United States.
Those friends of mine irritate me.
Yeah. No, I respect them very much, but that's never been a skill of mine. So I would have to take classes, and I would have to have a teacher saying, study this, here's your homework. And I don't have time, frankly.
Feeding the Chinese
system. Don't have time. So anyway, but this then brings us to learning the songs. So the first opportunity to learn Chinese songs. So I'm singing my songs. I'm having programs. I'm having shows. Some small shows, some bigger shows. And Fu Han is saying, you got to learn some Chinese songs. Because part of what happens, it's fine to sing your songs, but there's a couple of things. One, in the U.S., if all you do is sing everything that everybody knows, then you can work in the Hilton lounge, right? That's okay. But apart from that, people are going to say, what do we need you for? If you're just going to be, unless you're Vanilla Fudge.
You can play the radio. Yeah.
You can play Vanilla Fudge and change the tempo and stretch it out and a variety of other things. But apart from that, you need new things. And China was different. And I had to struggle with this because I'm saying, I want to do new things. I have all this stuff. And the problem is, in China, first, you have to attract people by performing things that people already are familiar with. Right. And then once you become a known quantity, then you have the opportunity to do other things and to become more independent and more creative. All right. So this was a brand new thing for me. All right. Because historically, I'd always done the other stuff. But anyway, some of the first Chinese songs was in 2009 and 2010. Fu Han is from a small city in Hubei province. Right. It's called Songzi. It belongs to Jinzhou. And in order to get there, the easiest way is to take an airplane to Yichang, and then it's about an hour and a half. Huh. All right? And her family people from Hubei, even if they don't know the city of Songzi, you know what they know? Songzi. Right. There's a special chicken. Yeah. Songzi chicken. It's very well known in the province. You know Songzi?
I know Songzi.
She knows Songzi.
What's special about it?
It's just very delicious.
Okay.
It's a very delicious
chicken. There's thousands of ways to make chicken here in China.
Yes. And it's all natural chicken. It's not store-bought chicken. These are real chickens that are farm-grown and farm-raised and so on. And so on. And it's very, at least Hubei people, or even from Hubei, from other parts of China who don't know the city, and they say, "Oh, that's where that's from. I didn't know that." They know that chicken, so that's the big thing. The other thing, what's from? Do you like baijiu?
Let's say yes.
Yes. My favorite. I don't drink anymore, but my favorite baijiu is baiyunbian. Which is also from Songzi.
Oh, you were teaching me something. Teaching us something about China.
All right. So those are two specialties there. But her family lives have a farm. They lived in the city when she was growing up, and they moved to back to the countryside where they had grown up. And they have this land, and they do farming all the time. And they had invited me to come for Spring Festival. So I went in 2009, and I spent 9 days.
Wow.
In the countryside.
Once you're there.
In a farm family.
In the village?
In the village. And then in 2010, I spent a month there.
Really?
A month. Wow. That was a fascinating experience. At one point, this is the part of China where there's no heat.
Ah, yes, I've heard those things.
At one point, it was really cold. And I was complaining. And Fu Han says, "You want to go back to Beijing?" This was one evening. And I said, "Yeah, I think it's better." And then the next morning I woke up and I said, "What a stupid thing. Why would I go back just because it's cold? Look at this wonderful opportunity and experience I have to live in the, be welcomed by a Chinese family in their home in the countryside. Right. How many foreigners get this opportunity?
Exactly.
How stupid can I be? Just because of the weather. I hate, I grew up in LA. I hate cold." So anyway, I stayed and had fascinating experiences.
What is most fascinating?
These were four songs. 4 songs came up out of these 2 trips. Yeah. And part of it was we would have dinner, and each night her father, we would have discussions about comparing things in China or in the United States and how people celebrate holidays in the United States versus how things are celebrated in China. And the second time I was there, it was it's not a celebration, commemoration. It's called a Taoist commemoration it's called Sannian, for people who 3 years after they've died.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay.
And all of these Taoist priests who were all mostly relatives of the family show up and they spend a whole day praying and singing. And
that's the tradition that typically in a countryside of China, in the village.
Yeah. So I got to be there for this.
Wow.
And part of what happened was, and we went around and toured different, the neighbors in the village, and this particular villages are different. Some villages, you got all of the people living in 1 or 2 buildings or in very close. Here was their house, and over there is another house, and over there is another house, and there's some distance. They're all walking distance. They're not difficult to get to, but it's not everybody compressed into one particular area. And so when I went back the second time, right, people, their neighbors had seen me before. Sure. They knew me. Everybody is welcoming me back. So it was just as I described it in another song. I described it in another song as saying it was the cold was overcome by the warmth of my welcome. Ah. All right. So.
Did they kill the chicken and cook the chicken?
Chickens and pigeons. Yeah, the house, they have chickens and pigeons are just wild, but they raise chickens on the roof. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And we'd go
are they
up
wild?
At night.
Or
no,
like
the chickens.
The pigeons.
The pigeons are wild.
Yeah, so that's
Pigeons
also typical specialty in far side, countryside.
Right.
And that's also...
So if you grab you one, you can...
No.
Yeah. So this was 3 songs. I wrote an article for a magazine called China's Ethnic Groups. I have a large section about this in my book called Spring Festival at the Home of Family Fu. Mm-hmm. And so part of what would happen every day is her father would teach me songs. And so Fu Han would take
he was also
songs.
a musician. Is that where she...
He's a self-trained musician.
Okay.
He's a self-trained saxophonist,
wow,
erhu player, and flute player, all of which self-trained.
That's pretty crazy.
And a singer. And he did this all by himself. But every day he'd come to me, and I knew it was time. And I brought my guitar. And then what would happen, and Fu Han would take the Chinese, and she'd put it in pinyin for me.
Okay.
And then
so you could sing along.
So I could sing along. And then part of what happened at this point, I can now teach myself a Chinese song. But it took a while. And then I came back to Beijing, and I would be playing, and I'd be singing, and she's real tough. She'd say, "No, don't mutter. Speak clearly." She may get furious if she hears this, but she knows this is true, and I've talked about this before. But I owe her a deep debt of gratitude.
It sounds like
all right, because of this. And I would get frustrated, and I said, "Stop, don't." But I knew she was right because I learned through it. I learned through it because she was right. I was being sloppy. I was being careless and so on. So I had to do it. But it's now a point where I can go and if I figured a song, if I can find an MP3 online or something, or somebody gives it to me and I can take the words, Chinese characters, and if I can get it, sometimes online you can find the pinyin, right. Sometimes you can't. And then a critical part in me learning to sing a song, first step, learning to play it on guitar.
Okay.
All right. I had to figure out the tablature on guitar. And if I could figure that out, then I could control things. I could control the speed until I was ready. I could control the key, because oftentimes what I find is not a key that I can sing. And then once I had that, it then comes down to the phrasing. Figuring out the phrasing, because you got, there's the old concept about poetic license, that you can change how a word is pronounced or the order of words or various things. So I would have to figure that out, and I would use the guitar to help me do that. And then the hardest part is memorizing. I can sing about 25 songs.
I was going to ask if you had like a music stand with the lyrics in front of you.
Sure do.
So, yeah.
I sure do. And then what I have is I have that. And then if I'm trying to learn a new song, and I have songs that if I have the words, and if I can look at them, I can sing a lot more songs. Yeah, that I've learned, that I've already learned with the pinyin, that I've already learned the melody. I've already learned the melody.
Like the melody's in your head.
The melody's in my head, and I've already worked through the phrasing, and I've listened to other recordings enough so I know how to phrase it, and so on. So I could sing a lot more songs.
So you put the right words in the right phrase.
Yes, yeah. But I don't. But a lot of songs I haven't memorize the words. So I can memorize the words, but that's the hardest thing, and it takes a long time. So not only do I have a big music stand with the lyrics, but periodically, if I'm really working, then I take some 4x6 cards and I put the lyrics on there, and I keep them in my pocket, and I pull them out at different points. If I'm walking down the street, or if I'm on the subway, trying to memorize.
Well, you have to be learning some Chinese through osmosis. You're learning I imagine you're learning very poetic Chinese because you're learning songs.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Often, if I can say certain phrases or certain kinds of expressions and so on, and often people will comment on my pronunciation. Right. And I say, that's all due to the singing.
Right.
That's all due to the singing. And that's part of why I can deal. And I can also, I can deal with pronouncing pinyin. Mm-hmm. Right. I can understand how to do that. I don't sing any song if I may not know every word, but I always know what the song's about. I always know the meaning of the song in order to be able to put it with the proper affect, emotion, feelings, and so on, spirit, and so on. But when I'm singing Chinese songs, I make a point of not trying to be a Chinese person. They don't need a foreigner singing Chinese songs like a Chinese person would sing it. Part of what I do, I've been asked a number of times in different interviews about how come music, Western music in particular, is so popular in China, and Chinese music is not particularly popular outside of China. And what I explain is, from my perspective, is that the Chinese music is harder to understand. And I don't mean just the words, but the tones that are used, the instruments, other kinds of things are less familiar to people. So when I play Chinese music, I do not perceive this as cultural appropriation. I perceive this as trying to provide an introduction to people, using an instrument, using phrasing, using melodies that are similar but not exactly alike, that are more comfortable, which can then provide someone to say, oh, where's that from? Oh, I'd like to hear more of
curiosity.
That. And then you can introduce people to the original sources of where that comes from. So that's part of what my focus is about. Right? I'm not trying to impersonate a Chinese singer. It's ridiculous. One, I couldn't. Two, there's no point in doing that.
I think I appreciate and respect why we pay attention to concepts such as cultural appropriation. However, I think it's dramatically overstated, overused, overplayed. I think it misses the point so often because we're trying to learn about other cultures. Yeah. And I only have my particular self to do it, and we each have ourselves to interpret things. Right. So I think it's sometimes it's used as a cudgel. I think it's used to I think it's misused a lot. So I appreciate that aspect of it.
So that
was actually a question. That was one of our many questions that you've answered a lot of our questions just in context of talking. But Ying has a few more for you that we want to do.
You have more questions.
We do.
It's magic. You automatically answer many of our questions because we're already on this part that you were talking about. You are working on bridging this, trying to combine the traditional Chinese culture and Chinese stories with the American country music, right, style. And like what would the reaction look like when you're performing this particular combination when you're hearing in China in different crowds,
Yeah, when you meet a new crowd for the first time, if they don't have context for you, what's that like?
Yeah, it depends on the kind of crowd. I've had shows where I've been out in the countryside, all right, singing, which is different than a university audience, and it's different than being at a wedding and sing. I've sung at 22 weddings. Wow. Some big ones, some small ones, some little ones in the country, some on the beach in Sanyang, the beach in Yantai, that fancy hotel in Nanjing. All right, all different kinds of people and situations. I had 4 shows that I was part of the bill with 50,000 people in the audience.
You have seen
one in Hohhot. Inner Mongolia. Yeah.
Oh, I've never been there.
Big show. Zhaojun Festival. You know Zhaojun, the princess.
One
of the 4
beauties.
Chinese beauties. They have a big festival. There's a beautiful stadium there. I sang there and that. And the other 3 were all in rural Jiangsu province. Okay? I sang at Renmin Dahui Tang. All right.
Wow.
No, Guojia Dajuan. I didn't sing at Renmin Dahui Tang. I sang in the Opera House.
Yeah.
It was Zhou Enlai's 115th birthday, and I sang my song about
I'm here to be happy to be here in the home of
all right. And
so you see, like there's a lot of dots being connected.
Yes.
During your staying here, like if you could share with us like one magic that you did right or that happened that you have to make every dot connected to be able to connect so many audiences.
Okay.
And
yeah. What's your secret?
Let me tell you 2 things. There are 2 things. When China Plus interview.
Okay.
All right. At the very end, she said, "Do you have a recommendation for foreigners who coming about China?" And I said, "Yeah, the first thing you have to do is you have to forget everything you think you know about China and come to China and allow China to speak for itself. If you do, you will have a wonderful time. If you don't, it's going to be terrible." So that was point number 1. The second thing is that if after coming to China, there were things that I used to do, such as performing, all right, you stopped. But essentially, being in China picks up all of the pieces of my life. Teaching in a university. I hadn't taught in a university since the 1970s, all right, until I came to China again. So 1, being a university teacher. 2, music. 3, writing. All different kinds of stuff. So all of these things. Take them all. Nothing. Don't throw away any part of you. Just figure out a way to put it all together. And then through that, you can create something that is far beyond your wildest dreams of what you're going to do here. And that people are welcome, because part of what happens is all of it is new to a lot of different people here, whereas it may not be new. The other thing, there's an interesting phenomenon I found. I have a little, I can't remember if I included it in my book. But I don't go by myself or on my own initiative, but every once in a while, someone will have a birthday party or some other kind of celebration, and they'll invite me to go to a KTV. I never initiate going to a KTV, but if someone's celebrating and they invite me, then I will go. And there's an interesting phenomenon that I noticed at the very beginning. Imagine, I don't know the truth, but imagine you're a terrible singer and you have the microphone and you're singing. If you were in the United States, Brendan would say, okay, thank you very much. That's enough. Okay, somebody else want to sing? But in China, what will happen is people will applaud. And then several minutes later, somebody will say, why don't you sing another song? That people will encourage you instead of discouraging you. Okay? And that's part of what happens. I had one of the first people that I knew, I mentioned a series of friends who had come to China, and one of them mentioned anyone who has low self-esteem should come to China.
Okay.
All right?
We save your face pretty well.
Yes, that you're going to get a lot of encouragement because so many things that anybody has, regardless of however they are perceived of at home, if they are honest about themselves, right, and are willing to share what they can share, then people are going to be welcoming and inviting. You know, I've been in, when I was in Jiangsu province one time, I was invited by one of my students. Her uncle was the principal of a school out in the countryside. So she said, my uncle would like to invite you to come to the school. You could talk to his students. So we arranged for a Saturday and I went out with them, and it turned out that that particular day happened to be the birthday of one of the students who was the son of a teacher at this school. So they invited me, the principal, a couple of the teachers, the boy's family. They were going to go to a little restaurant. It was this small village. And they were going to this restaurant in the village. And what happened was we were walking from the school to the restaurant. And I noticed people coming out of their houses or wherever. And they're just staring. And then finally, at one point, I turn around. And there were 150 people following me.
Wow.
And I put a smile on my face and I said, Ni hao. And then I got smiles and people saying, Ni hao. People were curious, right? Some people, some places, you had 150 people following you. You might be a little fearful.
Right.
But these people were just curious. They had never seen a foreigner before. And it's, at least maybe on television, but not in their village. And, you know, they just wanted to be, they were curious and they just wanted to see who's there and find out more. Yeah. No harm. And that's a lot of what you get. That's a lot of what you get wherever you go. And actually, you know what? I have to tell you, when I left Huai'an, I was afraid that wouldn't happen anymore.
Oh, okay, right.
I was afraid that I'd just be another Lawai.
You don't get it as much in Beijing.
No, but you still can get it in many, many places. Yeah. Many places. It's still here. It's not as much, but it's still there, and it's fine. And it's the people are very willing to share what they have as well, and happy to communicate. And so it's a very unexpected experience, pleasantly unexpected.
So you have received a Chinese permanent resident card, which is green card, which is pretty.
It's really rare.
About 10,000 people.
Really rare, right?
Yeah, about 10,000
Really, I had a lot
people.
less of them.
No,
which is quite exciting to me.
That's a drop in the bucket. How hard was that?
The reason I got it was because in 2014 I received an award which is called the Friendship Award.
I was going to ask you about that.
The Friendship Award is harder to get.
Right.
What
And
is it
tell
about?
us
It's
what
only
that
about
is.
16,000 people. It's some manifestation. So what were the circumstances? The Friendship Award I essentially got, we could put it in the category of cultural ambassador. So on the one hand is my songs, the music of sharing Chinese music, but also the stories about China. And part of what happens with a lot of the music is when other foreigners hear it, they'll say, God, my experience is the same, that the specifics are different.
Yeah.
But it's the same. And it's good, but they couldn't imagine it being put in song. And then we have my book. But one of the other things that I did was years ago, I organized a series of lectures, which was called They Help Build New China. And it was lectures done by the children and grandchildren of foreigners who came to China between the 1920s and 1960s,
Wow.
some of whom were here. And they were from Canada and UK and Russia and Singapore and India and the United States and various countries. And I had begun to meet most of those people are now deceased. One particular woman who is not deceased is a Canadian woman who was born in Sichuan province. Her name is Isabel Crook. And the magical Fuhan last December for Isabel Crook's 104th birthday made I sent it to you.
That's what you sent me. That was a great documentary.
It was a documentary.
We'll link this in the show notes.
This is the first time she ever attempted to do a documentary.
That's amazing.
She wrote it, she directed it, she produced
Fuhan.
it. Fuhan.
Wow.
She did.
It's a great job.
She told the editors what to cut and where to cut. She didn't do the physical editing.
fantastic
She
job.
did some of the filming.
I mean,
And
I used to pay my mortgage doing that specifically, and she did a great job.
Yes, I will tell her that. She will be thrilled. Yes, everyone who sees this says, this is amazing. That aside from the fact that it was her first, people say
And the
this
lady's
is a
story
really-
is unbelievable.
Yeah, the story is fascinating.
Yeah, I could Ing's face for the audience. Inging
Yeah.
is eagerly wanting to see it, and you should.
Yeah.
We'll include. We'll probably have this show will probably have a record for links in the show notes between
All right,
between
very
Mark's
good. Yeah.
Mark's music and this
This
documentary.
afternoon, Fuhan is back meeting with Isabel Crook because what happened was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Fuhan arranged for Isabel, who is 104, and her 3 sons, who are a little younger than me, to all go to Sichuan province to visit the school that her mother ran, and to visit her old home and welcoming. And she's making another film about her.
That's really
because
cool.
she's making a film about the school, right? So this is just. She had never done it before. This was just the labor of love. She said, this story, she's getting old. We can't lose this story.
Right.
And
there might be many other stories like this in the hidden areas in China.
Yes, there are.
And I believe this kind of work is truly meaningful.
Yes, it's an extraordinary thing. Extraordinary. But so I had Isabel didn't speak, but one of her sons and her granddaughter gave presentations. And they talked about their parents and their grandparents and what they did and where they come from. And all of these people very proud of what they had done for China. A lot of them spoke about what it was like growing up as a foreign child in the 1950s and 1960s.
Her stories were so amazing. Like her parents were these trailblazers who, building schools and really involved in education and helping. Yeah. I mean, we're talking pre-World War II. I mean, so she was like a little girl during just
this
amazing.
is like post-World War I.
Yeah,
in fact, even
between
before,
World War I.
Even before, because her father...
Yeah, he was here before, right?
Her father was the interpreter
like
that went
dynastic
with,
China.
Yeah, that went with the Chinese workers. Her father was the interpreter who went with Chinese workers during World War I to do labor. It was the Chinese Labor Corps. And her father went as their interpreter. They're from Canada, Canadian family. But it's just an extraordinary story. So all of these people, and at first it was done at my university, Minzu University. And then I had 8 different speakers. It was a series.
And who had the idea of
Mine.
Of hosting this
I
series? But what was the reason?
I had begun to meet
drive?
I had begun to meet some of these people. And I would go and I'd talk to my students or I talk to my young colleagues, they, oh, guess who I met? And they'd say, who's that? And they didn't know them. And then I realized they need to know them. They look at me, they look at us, they say, oh, these foreigners. No, there were foreigners who came to China when it was a difficult thing to do. It was a difficult thing in China, and it was a difficult thing from your home country to come. All right? And I said, people have to know about this. People have to know. So I went to, and I talked to some of these people and said, would you like to come speak? I want to organize a series. And I talked to the dean of my school at Minzu University and said, I'd like to organize this series. And he said, great. So I had access to an audience. These other people wanted to speak, but they didn't have an audience. I had the audience. And I was able to arrange the audience and the place and so on. And then they came, and it was fascinating. Packed houses, packed rooms every time. And then afterwards, I was contacted by the State Administration of Foreign Experts Affairs, who give the work permits and award the Friendship Award. And they said, we heard about this lecture series. This is the kind of thing we wanted to do, but you did it. Thank you very much. Congratulations. We'd like to encourage you to do more. And later, I ended up hosting this as an actual class, 4-credit class that I was invited to do at Peking University. And where the students were just fascinated because I heard about this, but to hear it through the mouths of foreigners who were friendly at that time and so on, that was just brand new to them. So it was extraordinary. Anyway, so that's one of the things that chalked
led
up
to you
this,
getting these
that,
honors,
the singing, the writing a book, and I've written maybe 15, 18 articles that appeared in different Chinese English language publications, magazines.
You're probably
mostly.
one of the best examples here. We want to help our audience to understand this is truly like blend yourself with how China works. and I mean, there's a lot of things you inspired and from your story.
Well, you know what? I've always had the view that if I go somewhere, I don't want to be an outsider. I want to be part. I need to contribute something, and I need to take. And that's what I'm saying. I was able to dig up things from the past that I knew, that I had learned, that I had invested
using these pieces of yourself.
And
you got all that experience,
right? And I think that's a very useful thing. And I hadn't really thought of it that way until the past few years. And I suddenly realized, oh, I did this then, I did this then, I did this then, and it's still part of me. It was pushed down deep.
It's amazing.
But now
you have an amazing life here in China, and you have done a lot. But what are the things that you haven't done that you're looking forward to do in the next step?
I'm always asked this question. Well, as I mentioned, I'm writing a second book. I need to write a second book.
Well, what's the focus of that one?
The second one is it's going to include the stuff from the old book, but I have one section about winning the Friendship Award and the green card and so on. I have another section talking about the Belt and Road because there's a lot of misunderstandings about that. I have another section that talks about China and Africa because I've recently begun to meet a lot of African people in China from many different countries. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about that in the West and so on. And for most of the people that I meet, the contributions that China is making to Africa are very positive, and that's not usually what we see in
it's painted as that diplomacy and things like this.
Right, all kinds of stuff like that.
What is the purpose for this book?
The purpose is the same as others. I want to
tell China's story.
Okay, what happened was in the introduction of our book, the first book, I say, why did I write this? And I tell the story of a friend who had come to China. He came to Beijing at the very same time that I did. And although he had just entered China, he was a sociologist and he spent all of his life working as a statistician for different offices in San Francisco, the police, the fire department, the bus company. And then he retired, and a friend of his says, you want to go teach in China? And he had a contact at Minzu University. So he got him a job. And then after the first year, he realized a couple of things. Oh, actually, first, I would see him. He'd come out of his apartment And every day he'd read the New York Times online, when you could read the New York Times online. And he would read it and he'd say, I'm so confused. He says, I read the Times and all these things about China. And they say, this is bad, that's bad, this is terrible. And they come out, people are laughing, people are crying, people are eating, people are arguing, people are doing whatever people do.
All ladies are doing Tai Chi in the square across the street. Yeah,
all kinds of things. And he said, I don't understand. So it's just like Fu Han said, Mark's songs are about something different. And so that's the same thing with the books. It's trying to tell a story that that offers people a somewhat different perspective. And the book is written all in. I had 2 pieces of advice. The book was published in China, and there was an American editor who was the first level. She was my editor. And she had 2 particular suggestions that I think were very important. I had never written that way. My writing had been academically trained. All right. So, and writing the way she suggested was completely foreign to me. And it struggled. I had to struggle with it. Her first suggestion was write in the present.
Right.
Right. So the book opens with, it is August 28th, 2005. The car I am riding into the city of Huai'an is surrounded by bicycles.
Present.
Yeah, put us there.
Present tense. We give everybody the sense that you're there. She said the second thing is do not report. Have dialogue. Okay? Just have dialogue. So instead of saying, I met with Brendan and Brendan said this, I'd say, I met with Brendan, and then we'd have Brendan's quote.
So, Mark, what did you have for breakfast?
Yes, right. So...
It's easier.
No,
right?
It was harder for me.
Harder?
Much harder for me.
You having to imagine, imagine fill in the blanks.
Okay, but that was actually a good thing.
Yeah.
That was actually a good thing because it forced me to contact people I hadn't spoken with in years. So, fortunately...
refresh the mutual memory.
Yeah, fortunately, I got an awful lot of phone numbers. I have email accounts, and I now have probably 8,000 people on WeChat.
Right.
So... I can send them, you know what, I'm writing a book, and I would write out stuff, and some I'd ask questions, and then I'd write something, and I'd send it to them, and I'd say, does this look accurate? I'd say, yeah. I don't know if I said exactly that, but we could say that, okay? We'll say it that way, all right? And so it forced me to get in touch, which actually made it better, because I have more things that were accurate about who is the person, where did they go to school, whatever the particular things, what was their family life like, and so on. And then all the things in the book are written, it's about China, but it's China through my eyes. So I don't just say, I'm talking to this person, but who is that person? Where'd they come from? How did I meet them? Right? And that in the course of what things within my life did I actually come to meet them? So the China-Africa thing comes up. The title is called African Brother. And I wasn't thinking about writing about China and Africa, but China Plus contacted me about a year and a half ago because it was the 20th anniversary of relations between China and South Africa. And I had done some things through China Plus, and they contacted me because I am known as a public speaking teacher and coach. And they had this activity where they put out a notice that they were looking for people to speak about their South Africa story. And they ended up bringing a total of 7 speakers from 4 South Africans and 3 Chinese people, all of whom had had contact. Although at least one of the South Africans had never been here, but she works for a bank that has relations in South Africa. So she's always working with people from ICBC. So she has contact and she's had to learn about them. But there were other people. Some were students here. Some were business people here. Some are Chinese business people who were in South Africa. and so on. And so I spent a weekend with them. And first, they already had a draft of speech, so I had to look at them and so on and offer them suggestions. And then the rest of it was coaching, getting up there. And the first day was just practicing and rehearsing and dealing with the timing had to be, this was for TV. It was for South African broadcasting television. So there were 13 and a half minutes because there was a minute and a half video introduction. So I had to be very precise and so on. And then one of the speakers was a young man who was just finishing his master's degree from Peking University from South Africa. And he got up and he told this story about, he said, a year ago, I moved off campus and I moved into a hutong. And he says, I walk around and most of the people in the hutong are old Chinese people. And I walk around and they ask, where do you come from? And he says, Nanfei, South Africa. And they say, African brother. And the specific, and yes, and right, that's right. And the specifics of this actually goes back to Mao Zedong, because the specifics of this had to do with when China was admitted into the People's Republic of China was given the Chinese seat in the United Nations.
Right.
And 26 African countries voted to admit China. All right. And as a result, this bond. But in the meantime, as I began to talk about more people, I began to learn that the contacts went back further. All right. So I talk about, why does China Plus call me? All right. What did I do there? And then I start talking about the speakers and their stories, and I have their words. And I sent him what I wrote. And he said, yep, right, that's fine. That's what I said. And then I added other things. And I did, there's actually a little bit of academic research in there to support some of what you were talking about. One of the things that commonly pointed to is failure to create jobs for African people.
Right.
And I have some academic research that somebody introduced me to. So I can add that in support. It's not an academic document, but it's basically giving people a somewhat different perspective. And a lot of it is through the actual mouths, coming from the actual mouths, both of Chinese people and non-Chinese people.
So it's documentary stories in a way. And that's part of why we do what we do. Because we want to hear from people and what their own experience on the ground is. We don't want someone to recite their white paper. Even if they are an academic and they've written something important. Okay, great. Why'd you do it?
That's right.
What did you learn that's not in the book, etc.? We want to know the
This is
stories.
never how I would have written. And this was an amazing piece of advice.
It's a good editor.
It was an amazing piece of, and it would struggle. I would send her some stuff, send her a draft of something. She said, no. Everybody says no. They're demanding. And she said, no, you still got the same thing. You're still a reporter. You have to have dialogue. Turn this into dialogue. But it was good because it's more interesting, but it's also good because, as I said, it forced me to recontact people. Right. And I learned much more, and the ultimate product was far better just because I had more information and I had more accurate information.
You know how to best utilize your cognitive capabilities. This is very precious in today's era, I would say, when it comes to what useful information, what reliable information or source we could get. We always have to force ourselves into a situation to find the best approaches. And this is something that I practice from time to time. And I believe that you always have to force yourself to a corner that you want to do something differently. And I think like a second guess, everything you have shared, is that because you have that particular independent thinking that is good engineering your mind.
Thank you.
That's what I see at this moment.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean,
very kind of you. Thank you.
Inspired.
Thank you.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic talk, Mark. There's again, we will have to do a part 2 because we scratched the surface. where I think we're chuckling. We have our ambitious list of questions, and we did cover an awful lot, but we have many things we didn't address. Is there a specific hub for you online you'd like to highlight? I mean, I'll include links in the show notes with individual video clips and articles and such. But is there a specific place to collect?
I do not have a website.
Anyone who does websites, you might want to get at Mr. Mark Levine.
Yeah, they can contact me. We can deal with that.
Okay.
No, I don't have a website.
I'll include a page.
I have a Weibo that I haven't used in years. WeChat is just so. I send out stuff. I have all kinds of stuff on my phone.
You want 8,501 contacts?
I have to have two. The WeChat,
right, one's full.
One of them's Mark Levine 2 because
I'm on Mark Levine too. Yeah.
I know because the other one is too full.
Yeah.
And sometimes what happens. Some of them, I go off and do a lecture at some university, and there's 200 people, and I get 160 people who add my WeChat, right. And then I've lost a lot because if you don't add it within 24 hours, it's gone. It disappears. Exactly. So you can find some music on QQ Music, but anything has to be done through my Chinese name, Ma克力文, because if you use the English name, you're going to get...
There are a million Mark Levines.
But the first one you're going to get is a jazz musician who is the author of a book called Piano Jazz Theory.
All right.
Right, and then the second one you're going to get might be Mark. He pronounces it Levine, but it's spelled Levin, who is a right-wing journalist.
I know of that guy too.
And then the third one is a left-wing professor at the University of California at Irvine, who also is a rock musician. And those are the top three that you're going to get.
None of them have your Chinese name.
No, you got to get the Chinese name. Nice. And Baidu is another place, and Youku, right. Baidu. And there's some video and some articles and stuff.
Ying found a lot on you when she was searching in Chinese.
So we're looking forward to seeing your book.
Yeah, this
coming out to Levine.
Yeah, I don't have one. I have to finish it, and two, I have to deal with a publisher.
Yeah.
But and I thought I was finished, and then what happened was I started dealing with checking. I had a publisher, but I started looking into other possibilities. And in the meantime, unfortunately, too many things happened. So I said, I have a list of things that still need to be written.
Like, how's your day arranged every day from your waking up?
Unfortunately, I am not the kind of person, I'm not a writer. I am a writer, but I'm not a writer. I mean, if I were solely a writer, then I would do what writers do, and that is sit down and 4 or 5 hours a day. You make a determination, you get up in the morning and you write. But I'm also a full-time university teacher, and sometimes we just had a show over at that book place, and that requires not only the show, but it requires rehearsals for the show, and then... I write when I have time, and it's so I wrote a lot during the Spring Festival holiday, and not a great deal, a couple of short pieces since that time, but and then I haven't been doing as much traveling this year as in 2018. There was one point I was out of Beijing for 6 weekends in a row. And all over. And some of them also result in songs, and some of them result in articles, and some of them may be things that will be incorporated into the next book. But it's going to be a while, but I have another list of other books.
Well, we will check back in with you a little bit further down the track. Mark Levine, thanks so much, man.
Thank you. Very good to be here.
Thank you.
Happy to share some information.
We're glad to have you do it. All right, that's the show this week. Don't forget to visit HowChinaWorksPodcast.com to find out more about Mark and this episode, to check out the upcoming How China Works Live, and to sign up if you are in Beijing or will be in Beijing a week from this coming Tuesday, which is August 20th. Thanks again for listening. Hit the contact page if you want to say hi to us, and otherwise, we will see you next week.